Michael, thank you so much for doing this with me today. I wanted to interview you because I know you've had two different careers. The first being your former professional dancer, and then now you're a vice president of external engagement and development, and how those two kind of linked and how you moved forward and everything. So, if we could start with your background and then how you transitioned, that would be great.
Sure. My life in a nutshell.
Yeah, in 5 minutes. No.
Yeah. So growing up, I had a very creative family. My mother played the piano. We were very uh, close to the arts, and I always loved to dance, right? So at 8 years of age, I started taking dance lessons. But as I got into junior high and high school, other things kind of came in. I did more singing, musical theater, but that I always had that love for the arts. And so when I went to college and graduate school, I kind of moved towards arts administration, marketing, communications, things that I thought would be able to help me if I wanted to get a job in like the arts or nonprofit. Never really thinking that I could be or would be a professional dancer. And so after graduate school, I moved to New York City. I had a scholarship at the Joffrey Ballet School in New York, and um, it kind of went from there. After a summer, I got into the second company, and from the second company, I got into the main company and spent the next, well, basically almost 13 years dancing with the Joffrey Ballet, and we traveled all over the world. It was a great experience, and really, I felt like that was my true calling. Right? I loved it. Even though some days it was hard going to work, I loved it. And the performing aspect of it. But as any dancer knows, you that career is going to be short lived because there's a certain time of expiration for a dancer's career.
Dang
And
it.
I know, dang it. So when I turned 40, I was like, I've got to think of what my next career might be and what that transition would look like. And so I started looking at some of my transferable skills, things that I had learned not only in college and grad school, but also as a professional dancer, and realized that I was organized, I was disciplined, I enjoyed people and talking to people, and I was most passionate about things that had to do with the arts or things that were supporting the arts. And I had an opportunity to um, get to know a vice president of advancement, is what it's called, at a college in Chicago. And he said, I know you're in the process of retiring from dancing. I've got an open position. It's basically in event management for fundraising. And I thought, well, event management, that's kind of like performing or getting ready for a show. And I knew that my skills around organization and kind of project management and all those kinds of things would probably fit nicely. So I said, sure, I'll do it. And so I spent a couple of years and really found that I had skills and abilities to really thrive. And I also like the idea of raising money to support the mission of an organization. And so that's kind of what launched me into this second career. But I think that definitely the arts and performing, being a performer, having been on stage, kind of knowing that if I was thrown into any kind of a situation, I could kind of make it work, helped me to be able to talk to people that I didn't know, get to know them, build relationships, which is really what fundraising is all about. It's about building relationships with individuals, getting to know them, and connecting their interests and their passions to the mission of your organization. And so I spent 10 years at this in kind of higher education. And then about 8 years ago, moved to museum work and still arts and culture. And yeah, that's kind of where I landed. I'm now a vice president of development and external engagement.
So with that now, I mean, I totally agree. I think with every career or every job you have when you're younger, or anything, every challenge, it's a stepping stone, and you develop all these new talents and skills, and it helps you propel, like it progresses you to the next step. And so, what is your day in and day out schedule look like for you now?
Yeah, so it's definitely not a 9 to 5 job. Those are kind of the office hours, but there's a lot of evening events, and also it's about, in my current role as a vice president, you not only do your job, you also are representing the institution. So when I go to a reception, or I go to a performance, or I'm out at a luncheon, I'm representing the organization as well. And so I spend a lot of times, evenings or weekends doing that kind of work, which builds a network of people and connections and helps build those relationships. But for the most part, it is like a 9 to 5. In this job, like in a university setting, there's more travel. Sometimes you're going across the country to visit with alumni or major donors. In the museum, especially for a museum that's specific to a city, there's probably less travel required. But yeah, I enjoy it. I kind of like the non-traditional hours. Like I'll get up and jump on the computer and do emails from like 7 to 8 o'clock in the morning, and then kind of get ready and get into the office, and then have a lot of meetings and things like that. But I'll run out for a lunch appointment, or some appointments during the afternoon, come back. Sometimes I can leave early. Sometimes I've got an event, at night. So it's very flexible. It was just the right fit, right? It's funny, when I first went to college, I thought I wanted to be an accountant, right? Because I was so organized, and I liked having everything kind of orderly and make all the numbers add up. But I realized that I couldn't be like sitting at a desk all day for 8 hours and just kind of focused on a screen. I needed to be able to have flexibility and mobility. And I'm not saying that accountants, that's all they do, but
Yeah.
my idea, my thought was, yeah, could I just sit at a desk all day, or and it just wasn't for me.
Right, right. It seems like there's a lot of positives for you. What might be some drawbacks for somebody?
Well, the big challenge, I think, for anybody in fundraising is that there's always a need for money, right? And so your organization needs X number of dollars to be able to operate every single year. And those are called a fiscal year. And a lot of organizations, especially in kind of education and arts and culture, their fiscal year is from July until the end of June. So it doesn't match a calendar year from December or January to December. And so, but every fiscal year you have to start at zero, and then you've got a goal of X that you have to accomplish. And so there's a lot of pressure in that. And so you've got to make sure that you're cultivating and stewarding the donors, so that they will make another gift the next year, and so that they repeat every year. And then you've got to make it interesting. You've got to show the impact. You've got to, this is what we're doing with your money. This is how your money is making a difference and contributing to the mission of the organization. So that makes it very dynamic and interesting. But it is also the challenge is that every year you have this mountain to climb,
Yeah.
in a way, right? And
Can
then,
yeah, go
yeah,
ahead.
I was just saying, and that's just for general operating. Like if there's a special capital campaign or a special project or initiative that you have to raise extra money for, that's in addition to. And most every nonprofit organization these days needs that extra fundraising as well.
Do you have to be creative in how you approach fundraising?
For sure. I mean, there's some basic ground rules, if you will, and uh, procedures and ways of doing it, but every organization is different, and your donors respond differently, and so you really have to have a good sense of your audience, the culture of your organization, um, the goals, the strategies that you have as an organization. So yes, that's where the creativity comes in. How do you build that narrative to get people to support the
Right.
organization?
Gotta cater to your audience, you
Yeah,
know? You might not
always.
wanna do a race if people aren't interested in something like that, or,
Yeah.
might wanna do a gala and then, something like that, but is that kind of what you do as well?
Yeah. So I was just going to say it's interesting that you bring up gala because we're finding now in kind of this post-pandemic or vaccination world that we live in, um, people, I'm not sure that galas are going to be the same as they once were, and we were already seeing kind of that trend of throwing a big lavish party in order to raise money kind of going away anyway because it's very expensive to do those kinds of fundraisers. And so, just an example, if you sold a ticket for $1,000 to come to a gala, you've got the food, you've got the decor, you've got beverage, you've got any other kinds of expenses that go along with that. And so that $1,000 gift may end up being only $750 after you've paid for all of your expenses.
Mhm.
And donors are getting more and more um, attuned to what that means, and I think most donors would rather see that $1,000 just going directly to the organization as opposed to having the party.
Sure.
There are some that absolutely love to have that kind of social aspect to it, and I think for an organization, there is an advantage to having a dinner or some kind of an event because you have a captive audience where you can tell them about your mission, who you are, um, and you know talk about the impact of your organization. But they're becoming less and less expensive. Not big flower bouquets, not you know outlandish decor. It's becoming much more about using the money in a very wise and uh, important way.
Sure. How are people kind of transitioning? Like, I know it's so new because we're kind of still in the pandemic, but
Yes, most part, I think everyone is eager to get back into a room and socialize, right? For the last 2 years, we haven't really been able to have that interaction. And so people are wanting to come back. They're wanting to get back in a room with their friends. But they're still very cautious, right? And so we have to take extra precautions and thoughts around wearing a mask, or do we check vaccination cards, and how are we going to actually roll out the logistics of an event, right? So that people feel safe, but they still want to come. But I still think that as we move on in the years to come, we will see less emphasis on these big gala type events. I think there will still be big moments and there'll be big fundraising type of events, but it won't necessarily be a sit down dinner with speakers and, like there used to be.
what would they do to replace it? Do you know some ideas that people have done or you have done?
Well, there's a lot of online type campaigns. Like we're doing right now a giving day for my organization where that one day we try to raise X number of dollars, and we do a lot of things on social media that draws people in. It makes them feel connected, and it could be funny, like having a mascot or I'm in Chicago, so Chicago hot dogs are like a really big thing. So we have a mascot of a hot dog. And so that hot dog maybe runs around the city and shows up at, Millennium Park or, a
Are you in the
landmark.
costume?
I am not. I am not.
Just-
But, just kind of clever things like that.
sure, sure. To pique people's interest.
We are still doing our gala,
Sure.
and we will probably continue to do that, but we're trying to cut down on expenses and make it much more cost effective. And our gala too, we honor people. We give away an award, so you have to kind of do that in person.
Sure. Well, of course,
But
who doesn't want to receive their award,
I know it's like the Academy Awards. I want to be there and give
You're
my
nice.
speech. But other organizations are moving to virtual type programming. Um, and actually there's even a big nonprofit here in the city that has gone to what they call the Ungala. So it's like a gala, but instead of having a big dinner, it's more of like a party. It's around a performance, right? And everybody comes. You can still dress up, but instead of having everyone sit down at a round table and have a chicken dinner, they will have cocktails and hors d'oeuvres, and people will be able to mingle and circulate, and you still get kind of the same effect without having to have the extra cost.
Wheels are always turning for people, ways to reinvent something, or yeah, just be creative. And I mean, because we have a job to do, but sometimes one way doesn't work anymore, and so we've got to switch gears. So we kind of
Yeah.
reinvent ourselves. And
The things I like about this job is that it's always different, right? Based on who it is you're talking to or what event it is going to be. Um, you're always kind of having to be on your toes and understand who that individual is sitting across from you or that you're talking to, and each day it's gonna be different.
mhm. With you being the vice president of development and engagement, what are the other jobs that like you oversee?
So in my area, we have membership, we have annual fund, which is kind of that annual general operating support that we ask every year, um, grant writing, um, and then in the external engagement aspect, it's education, like school visits, community partnerships, um, community engagement, actually, where we go out into the community and provide programming and meet people where they are, as opposed to having them come physically to the building. And that's really important, I think, especially as we're coming out of the pandemic. And then another aspect that I think a lot of people don't realize in fundraising and development, or any job where you're working with people, the management of that relationship takes people to do that, right? Like we've got two people in our department that is basically focused on database management, database entry, so we can keep track of their gifts, of their attendance at events, and just so that we can get to understand their relationship and their patterns of giving better. So there's a little bit of a science to it, and there's a little bit of an art to it, right?
Some
And
strategy.
yeah, for sure, for sure.
I'm like, oh dang it, I'm not really good at that.
No, well, it is really. I think this is an important point to make. A lot of people feel like fundraising is, oh, you just have to ask people for money, and it's so much more than that, right? I don't even, to me, the asking for money is almost secondary. For me, it's more important to build those relationships. And so there's kind of what we call the fundraising cycle, where you kind of identify somebody that might be interested or might be a donor. You cultivate them, you get to know them, then you ask them for money. They give money, then you steward that gift, right? You thank them, you make sure that they understand how much we appreciate that gift and what that gift is doing to help further the mission of the organization. And then you kind of repeat that cycle, right? You just kind of keep developing that relationship. And so that's kind of the mechanisms or the science behind it. But the art is, how do you interact with that person all along those different steps of that cycle, right? And sometimes you're going to get to that point, you're going to ask them for money and they're going to say no. But that doesn't mean that then you say, well, I'm not going to ever talk to that person again, right? It might just not be a right time for them.
Right.
And really I enjoy meeting these people and getting to know them and what their passions are and what they love to do. And I don't know, I think that's why I've kind of went into this profession and like it, is because I love to talk to people and hear what
Well, I
makes them
think you're
tick.
really good at it. I mean, knowing you personally. My last thing is, what advice would you give to someone who's maybe interested in either of the careers that you did, or just in general when looking for a career path?
It's a really good question. And I actually I was thinking about this when we were talking in the beginning, because we kind of went quickly over my my whole life and the trajectory, right? And it
Forward.
but it if you look at it that way, it looks like it just was like kind of this linear line that went up, right? I started here and then I got this and then I went to this job and so on. But all along that path, there were failures, there were bumps along the road, there were things that didn't go so well and or that were really difficult. And I think that being able to see those bumps in the road as stepping stones, not as things that are going to prevent you from reaching your goal or what you want to do, um, then you can just keep going, right? I've learned actually more from the failures and the things that didn't work out the way that I thought that they would, rather than just kind of taking one step to the next to the next. And so I think that's really important. I mean, obviously everyone knows work hard, follow your passion, do what you love to do. But sometimes, like I had an experience where I thought I wanted to do something and I thought I loved it. And when I actually got into it, it was like, this isn't really what I want to do. Right. And so also being bold enough or being okay with saying this isn't going to work for me. And that might mean I have to start over, but it's okay. And I think as human beings, we're very resilient if we can believe in ourselves and also know that sometimes no matter what path you take, it it could be it could be up and things could be really good, and then it might be not so good for a while, but you can always get back up. And um, so that's always really, because I've had to reinvent myself, several times, and not just career wise, but like what kinds of jobs, what kind of things that I wanted to do, and um, yeah, just kind of believing in yourself and then having a strong support system, right? I think that that's also, you've got to have friends and family around that help you feel like you can do it.
Right.
Um, but
Because anyone can really do anything, but for the most part, I feel like if you stick to something and you work really hard and you want to make it work, you can make so many things work in your life. And
yeah,
to not be afraid of the road bumps.
yeah,
I
right,
think my parents had to tell me that early.
exactly. And also you to explore, right? You may think that you
Right.
want to do something, well, go for it.
Be
You know,
brave.
be brave and try it, and if it isn't, that's okay.
Right.
There's always other things. And then also, like I have always said, if something doesn't work out, I can always get a job, you know it's very cliche, but working at McDonald's or whatever, right? Like, I don't, just because I'm a vice president somewhere, it doesn't mean that my next job has to be a vice president. I
Right.
could I could be a manager or a director and somewhere else. All of the skills that you learn in life, I think, can be transferable, and kind of seeing how what you're doing now might transfer to another job will help you kind of explore other possibilities.
I really like that.
Yeah.
I'm on the same page. Well, I appreciate you talking with me.
Yeah, no, it's been a pleasure.